皆様、本日お忙しい中。
Thank you all very much for joining today's seminar despite your busy schedules. We will now begin today's seminar, Expected Demand-Side Actions Toward Steel Decarbonization, Global and Japanese Perspectives. I am Goto from Renewable Energy Institute, Eric Goto, and I will serve as the moderator today. It is a great pleasure to work with you today. Today's seminar is jointly organized with RMI and Climate Group Steel Zero with support of the Japan Climate Initiative and Japan Climate Leaders Partnership. Today's seminar will consist of 3 presentations followed by a panel discussion. In the first presentation, representatives from RMI will explain the establishment of a new demand-side-led platform in Asia and Japan. And the second presentation will introduce the activities of Steel Zero and related global developments. In the third presentation, Renewable Energy Institute will provide an overview of current status of steel decarbonization in Japan and introduce domestic activities. And the panel discussion that follows will further explore how Japanese companies can lead the creation of demand for low-carbon steel. After the seminar, we provide a networked reception, and we encourage all participants to exchange ideas and continue discussions on today's themes afterwards. Today's presentation materials will be available on our website after the end of the seminar. Well, please note that Ms. Priyanka Srinivas-san from Amazon, who was originally scheduled to join us today, is unable to participate due to scheduling reasons. Thank you for your understanding. Now, at the beginning of the seminar, Senior Manager of the Renewable Energy Institute, Yuko Nishida, will deliver the opening remarks. Ms. Nishida has been engaged in developing mid- to long-term climate strategies, as well as promoting decarbonization and energy transition in the sectors such as buildings and heavy industry, including steel. Nita-san, please.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us to today's public seminar, Driving Steel Decarbonization, the Role of Demand-Side Action in Japan and Globally. Thank you very much for coming. I am Nishida at Renewable Energy Institute. Thank you very much and nice to see you. First of all, I would like to discuss the background and the objective of the seminar. Please look at the front. The steel and iron industry accounts for approximately 7% of the global emission. In Japan, in the industry, about half of the industrial emission in Japan is iron and steel, which is, without decarbonization of iron and steel, carbon neutral by 2050 is simply impossible. Across the world, looking at the overall steel and iron industry, the emission is stagnant, is flat. In terms of the trend, it looks as if it has peaked out overall. However, there is excess production challenge, and just like Japan, in terms of emission intensity, not much is changing across the world. More recently, energy price is rising, and because of inflation, low carbon emission production or the production project of low carbon iron, the plans are under review or there are delays starting to emerge. About low carbon iron and steel, the hydrogen project, the launches are being delayed, which does have a huge impact onto overall projects. The challenge is the recent energy crisis and the political crisis are factors. In addition to that, there is the delay of climate change measures, and there seems to be a declining sense of urgency. That kind of atmosphere, mood, sentiment, I think, is crucially important. Despite such situation, as is on the slide across the world, there are many low carbon emission iron steel projects that are starting to proceed. For example, from blast furnace, moving to electric arc furnace using scrap, or hydrogen DRI. And then for the future transition to hydrogen, gas DRI, by 2030, 10 million tons of capacity are planned. And some of the projects are close to operation start. There are new ways of thinking as well. The international trade of green DRI iron is also starting to increase in areas where there is renewable energy. If green hydrogen can be produced, and if that can be used for the reduction, and then that would be formed for export and can be exported to countries where products can be produced. That kind of new supply chains are also emerging. Middle East and North Africa, in MENA and Australia, such direct reduced iron projects are emerging. Japan, Europe, Republic of Korea are the potential destination of exports. In different countries, there are support measures to support the low carbon iron and steel production on the left-hand side bottom. For example, in Europe, not only in the EU, but respective countries, national governments are providing support and subsidies for new investment, and hydrogen price differential support are provided. I will talk about this later, but in Japan already there are various measures that have been started. And then demand side initiatives are also increasing in public procurement to encourage the use of low carbon materials, or there could be quota mechanism. So green public procurement schemes are increasing. In construction and product, there is the embodied carbon that has to be dealt with, and companies are demanded to disclose scope 3, and such policies are also increasing. What is important is policies alone will not create the market. The low carbon iron and steel production that must be supported and cultivated. And after all, it is not only policies, but demand is necessary. Without demand, technology will not be developed, capex investment will not be made, cost will not go down. In other words, if there is clear demand signal, there will be more investment, and supply-demand will increase, which means cost can go down. Just like renewable energy or EVs, we have also seen these movement, but in iron and steel, the demand side activity is still insufficient. Many of the companies do understand the need to procure low carbon steel, but actions may not have started. Or which iron, which steel are really genuinely low carbon? It's difficult to differentiate. Or why is the price so different? Or how can they produce or procure? How can they purchase? And that is why what is important now is there must be more visible price value so that the end users can purchase low carbon product with comfort. And what is necessary is the assessment and evaluation of low carbon products. I will come back to this point later, but what is important is another important is the demand side initiative. To lead the demand side activities, there are increasing number of international activities that are increasing. SBTI is the initiative like corporate targets, which I believe you are familiar. And amongst the SBT, procurement of iron steel is now considered to be a core aspect. How to make sure that they are low carbon product, or how to rate or grade the product, or in the construction of building assessment to incorporate LCA. There are many various initiatives becoming increasingly active. And today, as a pioneer of demand-side initiatives attracting international attention is demand-led initiatives. At the moment, major international initiatives focusing on this sector, I think I can immediately think about 3 frameworks, and out of that, 2 initiatives I will talk to you today. The first is a non-profit think tank RMI in North America, Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform, will be introduced. Near zero emission iron steel buyers, and on the supply side, the producers, they will be linked together. They can be matched. So the future procurement will be committed in advance by offtake agreement. And in that way, with advance agreement, market formation is encouraged. Already in North America, there are some specific cases, and progress is becoming clear. And from SSBP platform, in order to launch it in the Asia Pacific, we have the members here to talk to us. Another is the Steel Zero by Climate Group. Steel Zero RE100 led climate group is taking the lead, and the member companies by minus 50% by 2030, and by 2050, 100% near zero or a zero emission is committed. And through these procurement demand side initiatives are expanding. Regarding Steel Zero, in the seminar held last November, a group was organized, and since then they have continued to be very active. They have increased insight, and they will talk to us again. In the panel discussion, in addition to the demand side initiatives, SBTI Technical Committee member, Senior Manager Ms. Takase of our institute will be on the panel, and we will have Director Nabeshima of the Metal Industries Division of METI to talk about the role of demand side and the challenges of Japan, how to match supply side and demand side, and how to activate these activities in Japan will be discussed. The environment of low-carbonized steel is facing a headwind, but that is why the demand side is more important. In Japan, we also want to garner the power of the demand side initiative, and we want to overcome the difficulties, and we hope that today's event will be a foothold. Thank you for your attention.
Ms. Nishida, thank you very much for your introduction. Let us now move on to presentation Y. From RMI, Climate Aligned Industries Program, we are pleased to welcome Principal Kyle Clark Sutton, Associate Ariane Deslodge, and Mav Masterson. And RMI, formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, is a US-based think tank. It has gained international attention for initiatives such as establishing sustainable steel buyers platform in North America to create demand for low-carbon steel, as is mentioned by Ms. Nishida. Kyle, please go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you to all of our partners in Japan for welcoming us and hosting us this week. My name is Kyle Clark Sutton, and I'm a principal at RMI's Climate Aligned Industries team. I've been with RMI for 5 years, working on policy and market shaping work in multiple sectors, including the iron and steel sector. We're very excited to be here in Tokyo this week to launch our Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform, or SSBP, in Japan. SSBP is a nonprofit initiative started by RMI in 2023, leveraging our expertise in market-based mechanisms and clean energy systems to mobilize demand for green steel. For those of you who are not familiar with RMI, we are an independent nonprofit organization and think tank working to accelerate the clean energy transition globally over the last 40 years. We have 600 staff experts and have worked in over 50 different countries with hundreds of global partners. We also work on emerging technologies with close to $3 billion in climate funding raised by the startups that we have supported through our efforts. We do this work in 4 key sectors, including heavy industry. The team here today represents our Iron and Steel Initiative and has a wealth of experience working directly with steelmakers, buyers, and other stakeholders in the market. And we look forward to talking to you all after today's presentations. So, why do we focus on steel and specifically on demand-side initiatives? Green steelmaking is critical to decarbonizing the global economy. The steel sector alone makes up 7% of global emissions. For buyers in key manufacturing sectors such as construction, automotives, heavy equipment, and others, steel can represent 27 to 50% of supply chain emissions. Addressing steel is therefore essential for companies in end-use markets, especially those that have near-term Scope 3 or supply chain emissions targets. Steel emissions are expected to grow significantly to 2050. Our analysis shows that most of the emissions reductions will have to come primarily from clean iron-making investments, as the iron-making process in steel manufacturing is the largest source of emissions in steelmaking. Although initial capital investments in green iron making can be high, the cost markup that is passed through to end-use products is often very small, estimated at 1% or less for cars and buildings, 2 to 3% in clean energy infrastructure, and under 20% in appliances and shipbuilding. In terms of demand, RMI has estimated that demand for near-zero emission steel could reach up to 20 million tons by 2030. In markets such as the United States, Europe, and East and Southeast Asia, with more demand coming from China, but that's not included in this particular analysis. Meeting this demand will require a large build-out of additional low-emission steelmaking capacity. However, unlocking this demand is not easy. Buyers and suppliers face a range of barriers and challenges. The first of these challenges is the high capital expense required for retrofits or new facilities, often without clear signals of sustained market demand, which can make it difficult to secure financing. Another challenge is long and complex value chains, which can limit visibility into contracting processes and make it harder to shift to procuring green products. Thirdly, a lack of standardized accounting guidance and verification for emissions claims can make it hard for buyers to differentiate between products and access transparent pricing. Interoperability and alignment between the growing number of standards in the market will be required. Lastly, shifting policy and trade environments continue to create uncertainty for investors and buyers. This uncertainty weakens confidence in cross-border partnerships and delays green iron and steel projects from getting off the ground. In response to these challenges, several pioneering offtake and voluntary demand-focused initiatives are emerging, with the goal of establishing bankable offtake commitments that can support novel green iron projects. These initiatives include corporate targets and pledges, such as Climate Group's Steel Zero initiative and the World Economic Forum's First Movers Coalition. which have brought a range of companies together to set commitments to reduce supply chain emissions and purchase green steel. Bilateral agreements have also emerged globally, but especially in Japan, with companies undertaking individual supply agreements with steel producers for lower emissions products to achieve corporate emissions targets. Collaborative procurement, such as the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform, complements these initiatives. With collaborative procurement, buyers signal demand for near zero emission steel as a group and can thus signal larger volumes of demand. This group demand signal is transformative, as it can unlock capital investment in asset-level technologies and expand new supply of near zero emission steel. With that, I'll pass it off to my colleague Maeve to explain a little more about the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform and our previous work in North America.
Thanks. Great. Hello, I'm Maeve. I lead our technical and engagement analysis for our demand-side initiatives in steel. And so in this next segment, I will share more information on the objectives of the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform, as well as some of our key learnings from the platform's inaugural procurement process in North America. So the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform falls under the umbrella of RMI's demand mobilization initiatives and buyers alliances, which all aim to leverage the power of voluntary demand to channel investment into the fuels and materials that we're working to decarbonize. We do this through the pooling of demand volumes from ambitious purchasers who are looking to tackle their Scope 3 emissions from aviation and shipping fuels, as well as steel and concrete production. On behalf of the fuel and materials buyers that we are working with, RMI facilitates the design and implementation of demand aggregating procurement tools such as collaborative requests for proposals and innovative purchasing models like book and claim. And we really believe that when aggregated at scale, these purchasing commitments can unlock a demand signal that is sufficient for producers to secure financing for their capital-intensive decarbonization projects. This pooling of demand multiplies the impact of each steel buyer's dollars today and accelerates the path to near zero supply. And this impact is even stronger when structured into advanced long-term offtake agreements. And we're already seeing these types of contract models scale production of low-carbon products that buyers will need to meet their supply chain targets. RMI's book and claim systems are used in parallel with these procurement initiatives and have shown a lot of progress and promise in enabling these early transactions, particularly in sectors and at stages of the market where we're seeing the largest barriers to procurement today. In steel, progress in clean procurement is delayed by the misalignment of where clean supply and demand exists today, as well as the low standardization across green product definitions, as my colleague Kyle mentioned. When anchored to high integrity standards and tracking infrastructure, book and claim systems have supported early transactions and are able to allow suppliers to basically have an innovative commercialization strategy to help monetize their investments and capture early market premiums. And for buyers, the book and claim system is a flexible procurement alternative to directly invest in first-of-a-kind projects and claim the associated climate benefits of those investments. And so far, these mechanisms have shored up 72 contracts of sustainable shipping fuel and nearly $200 million worth of investment in the production of sustainable aviation fuel. The North American Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform was launched in 2023 as a first-of-a-kind buyers group for clean iron and steel. Building on federal incentives for clean production technologies and the growing demand signals driven by low emissions purchasing commitments like FMC and Steel Zero, the platform's first procurement round pooled together voluntary demand from a group of 9 ambitious steel purchasers that represent key steel-intensive sectors, including technology, construction, renewable energy, and equipment manufacturing. These purchasers are motivated by ambitious Scope 3 targets and supply chain emissions, a significant portion of which is coming from the steel that makes its way into their final products that they manufacture or consume. On behalf of the North American buyers, the platform issued a request for proposal for just over 1 million tons of voluntary demand for near zero emission steel to be delivered into the North American market by as early as 2028. And since the close of the request for proposal, the platform has successfully drawn broad engagement across the steel value chain, with 13 project proposals submitted by incumbent and new entrant producers and project developers. These projects represent large-scale deployments of both novel and commercial-ready technologies for iron and steel making. Buyers are now engaging in contract negotiations with qualified RFP suppliers, and discussions are expected to conclude by later this year. So the Buyers Alliance operates under several key principles to drive early market development for clean iron and steel. First, our platform holds strong to internationally consistent high-integrity sustainability standards and classifications of low-emission steel, which help channel investment in high-impact technologies that are capable of realizing significant progress towards sectoral net zero. The second key principle is to support price transparency of remaining cost premiums for these near zero emission products beyond existing policy support. Third, aggregation and book and claim systems help create the alignment and standardization around emissions criteria that buyers need to understand the emissions impact of their premiums and procurements. This, we believe, is necessary to instill greater confidence in earlier transactions and helps expand the market for deeply decarbonized supply. The fourth principle is the platform's focus on accelerating investment timelines for large capital, commercial scale deployments of catalytic production technologies. As we've seen demonstrated by financing strategies of recently announced near zero emission steel products and projects, we know that securing large volume purchasing agreements and early green premiums are critical in helping suppliers reach final investment decision. And finally, the platform aims to build on existing regional and trade initiatives geared towards developing clean value chains and supportive upstream infrastructure to support the industry's transition. And from our engagement with clean project suppliers and developers, we know that voluntary demand is most impactful in supporting project bankability when combined with policy support. And this really highlights the need for complementary design with emissions-linked trade and compliance-based policy mechanisms. The first request for proposal was designed by the North American members to align closely with these principles. Core sustainability and procurement parameters of the RFP are anchored to ambitious and transparent product-level performance thresholds, which have given buyers greater insight into the early catalytic supply opportunities and the associated delivery timelines and cost premiums. The North American RFP also notably includes an option for purchasing only the environmental attributes of near zero emissions iron and steel through book and claim systems. And this is under strict guardrails for traceability and double counting. These, among other parameters, have really helped buyers open up pathways to translate their purchasing ambitions into signable offtake terms, which I'll walk through in this next slide. So over the course of the North American procurement process, the platform has drawn useful insights from first mover buyers that really help to establish a replicable framework for early procurement deals in clean iron and steel, particularly for long duration and forward-looking contracts. Because these are not typical procurement models for buyers to purchase steel today, we found immense value in identifying the key terms and criteria that we believe have large potential to unlock supply agreements today. While terms will of course vary from organization to organization, early contract developments have shown significant progress in integrating sustainability criteria into bankable contract terms and pricing structures, where these template terms are designed to meet the needs of both buyers and suppliers. These terms include multi-year take-or-pay volume commitments, clear and predictable pricing tied to emissions and/or emissions reductions, product performance guarantees, both in the quality and characteristics of the steel products and their associated emissions performance, and transparent and consistent and auditable emissions measurement and verification. These terms have also included book and claim specific provisions to enable attribute-only purchasing. Early discussions for both physical and book and claim purchase agreements have involved deep and widespread collaboration across buyers' procurement and sustainability teams, as well as suppliers' commercial, business development, and product engineering teams. These teams are working together to create sufficient levels of disclosure, traceability, and assurance needed for buyers to verify emissions performance and cost premiums and product capabilities of these first-of-a-kind projects. The high level of coordination required has also underlined the difficulties faced by buyers and suppliers today in negotiating these early agreements, particularly where there is little contracting precedent for low emissions iron and steel, and where several emissions and pricing contingencies exist for new projects and technologies. On top of this, shifting policy conditions also create setbacks, where in our North American process, we've seen uncertain or shifting public support cause delays in supplier investments and project developments, and for buyers have caused uncertainties over steel purchasing forecasts and timelines and budgets. Despite these headwinds, our North American process has shown significant progress towards establishing the frameworks and the terms necessary to mitigate these early market risks and lend greater confidence for both buyers and suppliers in establishing new clean supply partnerships and agreements. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague Ariane to share how we are planning to continue this work in the Asia Pacific and our early findings of clean steel demand in the region.
All right, thank you, Maeve. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariane, and I lead our steel team's regional work and partnerships in the Asia-Pacific region, along with our policy and techno-economic analysis work. We're really excited to share today that following the success of our North American work, RMI is now launching an Asia-Pacific Sustainable Steels Buyers Platform, with deliveries planned for the early to mid-2030s. This platform launch builds on the success of our North American work and the research from the past year, which estimates that demand for near zero emission steel could reach up to 6 million tons by 2030 in several East and Southeast Asian countries based on various voluntary corporate targets. This demand will come from several key end-use sectors, including the automotive, construction, energy, machinery, equipment, and appliances sectors. A few fast-growing offtake segments also include data centers and offshore wind infrastructure. Much of this demand is concentrated in Japan and South Korea, which is why we are here today. You can find more of this information in our recently released report called Asia Pacific's Green Steel Demand Opportunity. So, our platform will work closely with buyers and suppliers in the region to catalyze clean supply development with a key focus on Japan. This April, we launched our request for information, which is open until the end of this month, to collect information on the timelines and technologies of upcoming first-of-a-kind near-zero iron and steel projects. In the next several months, we will continue engaging with buyers and suppliers in Japan and South Korea. In the fall of this year, we plan to convene a coalition of ambitious buyers who are prepared to explore near-zero emission steel procurement. Based on our buyers' commitments and ambitions, we will then co-design an offtake intervention that will support first-of-a-kind projects to move past an investment decision and come online. This offtake intervention could include a collective request for proposal, as we did in our North American platform, or other supportive buyer-led offtake interventions. Based on this final intervention design, we'll then engage with low-emission suppliers to identify appropriate offtake opportunities. In early 2027, we plan to launch a buyer-led assessment of offtake opportunities, either through a request for proposal or a different evaluation system. This evaluation will also include supplier due diligence and term sheet development as needed. By the end of 2027, we plan to use these results to develop bilateral partnerships between suppliers and buyers for advanced purchasing agreements, and we aim for these purchasing agreements to begin the first deliveries of green iron and steel products in the early to mid-2030s. So why join the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform? Here, I'd like to briefly explain the value of joining our platform, particularly for Japanese buyers who are facing increasingly stringent policies and external pressures to decarbonize. First, through a platform like SSBP, members can gain early and stable access to emerging supplies of low-emission steel. As supply is expected to be limited in the early stages, this early engagement will support long-term, trusted relationships with producers, which is especially important in securing long-term supply. Secondly, participation will allow companies to demonstrate leadership in supply chain decarbonization, unlocking new markets of customers and end-use buyers who are sensitive to emissions performance. This can also help buyers progress on their commitments to Scope 3 emission reductions, while also contributing to broader industry and government climate goals, especially as policies evolve and become more ambitious. Thirdly, the platform provides reliable access to market insights. This includes visibility into producer readiness, expected cost developments, such as green premiums, and key trends in policy, trade, and technology, both globally and regionally, with a focus on Japan. Finally, through collaboration with RMI and our long-standing partners in the broader market ecosystem, including standard setters, industry associations, and other technical experts, members can benefit from the shared knowledge and best practices that we hold within our ecosystem, particularly regarding procurement approaches and alignment with evolving international emission standards. Overall, our platform aims to support companies in unlocking new green markets, meeting targets, and building the foundation for aligning with local and global climate policies. From a supplier perspective, particularly for Japanese producers, the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform also offers several benefits. First of all, participation will help improve demand, visibility, and certainty. By engaging directly with buyers, suppliers can better understand procurement preferences and explore mechanisms such as advanced market commitments, which will support investment planning and project financing, helping first-of-a-kind green iron and steel projects get built and begin operations. Secondly, the platform offers an opportunity for early market positioning in the low-emission steel market. Through collaboration with buyers and other stakeholders, suppliers can contribute to shaping how this market develops in the Asia-Pacific region in a way that reflects both regional priorities and global market demand. With upcoming procurement regulations and standards set by Japanese government, joining a platform like SSBP will help distinguish producers from others. It will also help prepare suppliers for long-term, comprehensive decarbonization strategies that will be critical as carbon pricing regimes and other policies become more stringent. Thirdly, suppliers will benefit from independent validation of production performance through RMI. This can help enhance credibility and transparency, which are increasingly important to customers, investors, and other stakeholders. Finally, the platform provides access to buyer feedback and shared insights, helping suppliers align their production, investment, and financing strategies with evolving requirements, such as high-integrity emissions reporting standards, customer expectations, and emerging policies in Japan and globally. Overall, SSBP aims to match suppliers with ambitious buyers, helping steelmakers access new green markets and transition towards a lower emission steel sector. So thank you all for joining the launch of our Asia-Pacific Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform. We're very excited to explore and co-design our platform with you all. If you have any questions, please come find us after this event or at the reception. We are excited to meet and hear from interested organizations as we continue refining the design of our initiative and demand-side interventions. We'll be in Tokyo until May 18th, next Monday, and are open to speaking to you all. You can also contact our team with the information above as we continue our engagement in Japan over the next several months. With that, I will pass it back to Eric for our next session.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Going on to the next presentation. Today we have Ms. Amin Khan, project leader from the Climate Group. Climate Group is known for the RE100 activities, and I think this is a familiar organization for the Japanese industry. From Climate Group, we will hear about the latest activities and initiatives to unlock the demand side. In November of last year, she kindly joined the program, and she is continuing her engagement with the Japanese industry here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to REI for hosting this seminar again today and giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you all. And thank you to everyone who is present and has given up some of your time to be here today. I am Samin Khan from Climate Group, and I lead the Steel Zero initiative, which I have been a part of for the last 3.5 years. Today I'd like to spend some time with kind of sharing very briefly what the global outlook for the supply and demand currently is. And following that, I will give an introduction to the Steel Zero initiative and how the demand side companies are coming together and playing the important leadership role in driving the steel decarbonization, and some examples of how that has been happening under the Steel Zero initiative, and then I'll conclude with sharing some opportunities for how demand-side activation can be progressed further in Japan. So to start with, some of this outlook you may already be familiar with, and it has been shared previously by Nishida-san as well. But we've got the current steel production capacity at production at 1.8 billion tons, so nearly 2 billion tons of steel being produced. And majority of this, so over 70%, comes from the primary steel making. So of course that comes from new mined iron ore. So the iron making is the first step, which is extremely carbon intensive. And that is where majority of the focus has been to decarbonize the steel industry. And of course, there's another production method, which is through reusing scrap steel, and which has also been very effective for circularity practices within the steel industry. But it is not sufficient to produce all of the steel that the world will demand now and by 2050. So even if the production capacity remains the same, which we know there will be an increase in demand by 2050, we still need half of the steel to be produced with iron. And therefore, there's a big focus on decarbonizing the iron making. So one solution that we talk often about is the technology that directly reduces iron using hydrogen as the cleanest fuel source, and that is, of course, DRI. So looking at the capacity or the outlook for green steel that we know of today, and I'm only looking at the DRI potential here, we already have about 50 million tons of DRI under construction and a further 165 million tons of DRI that has been announced. These are, of course, sourced from various sources, so it could be conservative figures, but we do hope this is going to be even more positive. There's going to be scaling up of these technologies going forward as well. And amongst the leading green steel producers, we have three that we often hear about who are constructing DRI using hydrogen. So this will be like the cleanest steel that will be available in the market very soon. And there's also, of course, further lots of steel makers who are, again, investing in DRI production with possibly using natural gas as the first, in the first instance, to switch from coal, which has some reduction potential, and then eventually moving to hydrogen in a few years. So again, just collected some figures here of what cumulative DRI potential looks like in the different countries that have been listed. And again, these are very conservative, and we hope that there will be a lot more potential coming out before 2030 as well. So that's what supply looks like currently. And in terms of demand, again, this is a bit of repetition from what Nishida-san and what RMI have also spoken about, but I think it's important to look at what does demand for green steel currently look like. And it is, of course, not the easiest to estimate because there are many, many sectors that use steel and millions of companies in each sector that will have a demand for steel and will have different ways of taking action and signaling that demand. So the very first, we've got companies that have set targets, corporate targets through SBTi, for example. And so on their own, they are working with their supply chain to see where the sources are, where they can reduce emissions across all the materials they use, steel also probably being one of the key priorities for them. And then we've got companies that are part of initiatives, platforms that help aggregate demand. So I'll talk a little bit more about Steel Zero. We've heard about RMI. There's the First Movers Coalition. And these are, I think, very prominent ways to aggregate demand. For example, we heard from RMI that through their North America SSBP, there's more than 1 million tons of demand for near zero emission steel from that group of buyers. Through the Steel Zero initiative, we have a demand for approximately 9 million tons of annual steel requirement by our members. So it's kind of clear to see what that demand looks like. And of course, we've got companies that directly engage in offtake agreements, so partnerships between suppliers and buyers as well. And when announced and publicly available, we get to see what the demand offtake looks like there. So therefore, the most prominent ways to actually calculate what the demand is through the joining initiatives that can aggregate demand or directly engaging in offtake agreements with suppliers. So about Steel Zero, we are a global initiative led by Climate Group and in partnership with Responsible Steel. And we bring together leading organizations that to help speed up this transition to a net zero steel industry. Our goal is to create a market for 100% net zero steel by 2050. And to do this, we have established a commitment framework where the companies that join Steel Zero have a target and a timeline of using lower emission steel for 50% of their steel requirements by 2030. So they have made a commitment to work with their supply chains to get access to lower emission steel by as early as 2030. So really, it is our members that is driving the success of Steel Zero initiative. And we have the ability to then use their collective purchasing power and their influence to work with stakeholders across industry and policy to see kind of what market transformation needs really look like and to help drive policy action, demand action, and supply action towards this transition to net zero steel. So here's an image of where the Steel Zero membership is globally. We've got a big concentration in Europe and in the UK, and our members are headquartered largely over there. And we also have members in China and in Japan, in Asia. In Japan, we've got Yamaguchi Heavy Industries that joined last year, so you may have also heard if you were part of these seminars, and I spoke about that last year as well. But I've also highlighted the regions where our members have active operations and supply chain, so that is where they are working to actively procure lower emission steel. In terms of sectors, no surprises, we've got members across renewable energy, automotive, construction, infrastructure, manufacturing, shipping, and consumer goods as well. So what is it that we and our members have collectively been driving? So Steel Zero has now been around for 5 years. And across the last 5 years, in the very, very initial stages, we were shaping what market demand looks like. So the first steps that we took was to define what lower emission steel is. So we set up the first quantitative definition back in 2020. And we set up this demand commitment framework that the companies then signed up to and committed to. From that, it was really our members that have then led the role and taken the leadership in driving forward and enabling us to have all the conversations that we can have to further progress this transition to net zero. So together, we co-wrote the first policy principles for a global net zero steel transition, and that has helped us shape a lot of our policy advocacy work. This was now written 4 years ago, and it's good to see that the dialogue has been shifting, sometimes positively, sometimes stalling, but there has been a lot of conversation in what needs to take place for steel to decarbonize. So of course, we have been iterating our policy principles as well accordingly, and every region has a different set of levers that we learn and that we learn of, and then we push and pull with our members as well. And with our members, again, we also developed the first data requests framework. So this was a way that the companies could ask their suppliers for data in a uniform way, so that the suppliers were getting similar requests and were understanding exactly what customers want. So whether it's embodied carbon emissions data of the steel they're buying, what standards or methodologies have been followed, what certifications the steel producers have got. It's the same set of questions that all of our members would ask their suppliers for. And so the same information that the suppliers would hear and be able to provide to their customers. And through that, that's how our members have been engaging with their supply chain, really understanding what are the barriers or what are the opportunities with getting access to lower emission steel and what certifications can verify that. And similarly, we've had the opportunity to really represent the demand side voice in policy, industrial policy conversations as well. We've done a lot of that in Europe because that's been the hub for a lot of policy activities. But we've been also exploring that in other parts of the world, like India, like here in Japan, in North America. So we've also been able to really leverage and work with our members to see where their operations are and where they need the most amount of support with policy to give them the incentives and the levers as well to push for demand action. And going forward, we are now at the stage where we want to scale the work that we're doing. And we are working in collaboration with a lot of international organizations and standards to, again, show what it is that the demand side are asking for. A key part is the harmonization of definitions and standards. And so it's great that we've got the responsible steel standard, the low emission steel standard in Europe, all working towards an interoperability framework. Right. So just a few links which you'll have access to when you've got the slides. We have published our impact report that celebrates the 5 years of work and impact that we have had. And as part of this, we've also got a supplementary case studies repository, so a link where you can access 14 case studies of the different ways our members have been taking action across their supply chain to further progress the procurement of lower emission steel. And I thought I'll share two quick examples as well. The first is through Volvo Cars. They have been working with the SSAB, and so in their newly launched EX60 SUV that came out earlier this year, they've got components made with fossil-free, with steel that comes from fossil-free electricity and nearly 100% recycled content. So these components from SSAB have been put in their cars, and so it's an example of direct procurement of lower emissions and near zero emission steel. And there's another example from Siemens Gamesa, who have also been very, very actively working in partnership with their suppliers as well as customers to build those ecosystems that can help collectively drive the procurement of lower emission steel in the wind sector. And just last month, we had the opportunity to co-host a convening with Siemens Gamesa in Madrid. And it was great that we had lots of different European companies from across the wind value chain, so leading developers, equipment manufacturers, leading green steel producers, as well as some government representatives. All we came together and we were really talking about how the wind energy sector could be a lead market for procuring lower emission steel. And that's a program of work we're going to be taking forward to see what's really needed to embed the procurement of lower emission steel within the wind supply chain. And remarkably, Siemens Gamesa have, of course, already been doing this. They've been producing towers that use lower emission steel in them, and it's already been implemented in one offshore wind project in Europe. So my last slide, in summary, what leaving messages do I want you all to take from this is there is a real opportunity for demand-side activation here in Japan. And what Steel Zero is working to develop is that forum where we can bring the demand-side companies together and we can gather what you really require as a customer to then share that with industry and with policy stakeholders so that your voice is, of course, represented in the way the market is developing and how we create a green steel market here in Japan. And so there's that opportunity to then design and shape what this green steel market would look like, and then to discuss and reach an agreement on the important topics on what actually green steel means to you and what your willingness to pay for the green steel would be. So these are the kinds of discussions that, of course, we could enable in a collective forum and in workshops, and that's the plan that we are building out in Japan. And so how can Steel Zero then help you all is with, similar to RMI, as a platform, we have the ability, we have a lot of insights, a lot of knowledge, and we can bring that to you, share insights and learnings of what's happening across the world. We've also can work on best practice guidance and tools together on what exactly it is that would help the companies to procure lower emission steel, engage with suppliers, or advocate for policy changes. And so ultimately, we can work towards building that confidence on what you need to be able to actually make green steel purchases and commitments here in Japan. So we're very excited about what we can be doing together. And like I said, it's Steel Zero is one initiative. Of course, there's RMI. So definitely these platforms and initiatives are a very good place to get a lot of knowledge, insights, to then be able to actually take action and lead the kind of demand voice in all of this. Because truly, it's not just supply or it's not just policy that will alone move the market, but it's in tandem when suppliers move, when demand side shows the signal, and then when policy can activities and mechanisms can then help drive the market transformation forward. So everyone has a role to play in that. Thank you so much for giving me this time. And of course, I will be around for any further conversations. Thank you.
サミンさんありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Samin. Going on to the third presentation, this is about Japan's policy and the future projects. The speaker is Nishida-san, Renewable Energy Institute. Once again, it is me, Nishida. I will talk about the overall iron and steel industry in Japan and what we are aiming for in terms of decarbonization. The policies are very fluid and mobile at this moment, and therefore I will introduce the policies. I would say it's quite advanced. I mean, Japan is also progressing. I hope you will understand that. And under such policies, what are the challenges, what still remains as our homework, and based on that, how to work together with the demand side. Those will be my topic, and I hope this will be a bridge to the upcoming panel discussion. Again, I have to start here. This is the emission in the Japanese steel sector. It is on the decline. That's fine if emission is on a declining trend, but the bar graph is the production, the blast furnace, plus there is the electric arc furnace, and at first sight it looks that the emission is reducing, declining smoothly. However, there is a reason to that, which is the orange graph. After all, the production itself is declining, and that is the major factor. We have to keep in mind that the production is declining in the first place. So the trend is quite similar to the global trend in Japan. The fact that emission is going down, that is slightly different, but the intensity is the same with the global average. And by 2050, can we reach zero? That's far away goal. What we are targeting is near zero, as close as possible to zero emission steel, and ultimately negative emission, hopefully, is the target by 2050. However, yes, we want to achieve zero, but the production we will have to continue, and we hope that there will be a certain level of production. So how to reduce the emission in order to reach zero emission? Yes, it is very far away goal, but we do have the 2030 target, which is compared to 2013, minus 30% of emission reduction. And Japan's NDC contribution, last year, there was the 7th Strategic Energy Plan, and by 2035, 2040, these are the targets. So by 2035, minus 60%, minus 73% by 2040. And then in the iron and steel industry, what targets should be set up? There is a strong expectation over the iron and steel industry, and we are waiting for the Japanese industry to come up with their target. And there is the overall reduction target, but we look forward to the industry's initiative in Japan. On top of that, what is necessary is, prior to 2030, we must develop the near zero emission steel production capacity. This production capacity means that ultimately, by 2050, in order to achieve the 2050 goal, it must be a bridge, a transition that links to the ultimate necessary goal to achieve 2050 goal. And this diagram I have borrowed from METI, apologies, but the blast furnace and the basic oxygen furnace, what is expected to happen, but these are the three major pathway or possibilities or routes or technologies. These are the three possible scenarios. So there is the blast furnace and using hydrogen. That was first promoted, the use of hydrogen. However, just with this technology, achieving near zero seems to be difficult, and most likely on the left-hand side, it is probably transition. The middle part, which is the hydrogen-reduced iron, or on the right-hand side, that is scrap used in electric arc furnace. Ultimately, these two pathways, we hope, will become the major technology for us to achieve the 2050 goal. However, still, even for these two technologies, some have started in Japan. Scrap in the electric arc furnace, such projects already have been launched in Japan, and the blast furnace with hydrogen or hydrogen and direct reduction as an R&D is ongoing, but the technologies are still not perfected. But in order to achieve near zero emissions, still challenges remain. In particular, at the middle, regarding the DRI, ultimately, we hear that this technology can achieve near zero emission. However, the technology is still not mature. However, looking across the world, it seems that there is a light seen in the horizon. There is a very high possibility. But in order to achieve commercial realization, there must be decarbonized hydrogen, and that is difficult for Japan. In particular, in order to produce green hydrogen, renewable electricity is required in a huge amount. That is one challenge. So such hurdles have to be overcome. On the right-hand side, using scrap in electric arc furnaces, again here, lots of power will have to be consumed. So the electricity will have to be reduced or must go green. And how to ensure the procurement of scrap volume, that also will be a difficulty. So by studying these challenges and without overcoming these hurdles, we cannot achieve the 2050 target. As I mentioned earlier, the low emission steel projects are starting, and we will have to focus our attention. So this is for your information, if you can come back and see the specifics later, but using hydrogen in blast furnace, ultimately, the reduction potential goal is 50%, and the remaining 50%, CCS has to complement for the residual emission. In Japan, the cost is high, and CCS, Japan has to export to other countries. So these could be truly challenging. And then the two technologies on the right-hand side are expected to play larger roles. But again, we really have to be very careful and thorough in the consideration. And to promote these potential technologies, the policy makers are really focusing on this area. I mentioned this briefly earlier. Transition from blast furnace to large-scale electric arc furnace. These transitions are occurring. This is a huge project. Yahata steel mill, the sacred place of iron steel making in Japan, and the blast furnace is to be stopped in the sacred site of Yahata and to shift to large-scale electric arc furnace and using scrap electric arc furnace, and to complement, in order to maintain the required quality, DRI to be used is the plan. According to Nippon Steel, Yahata is the top priority, and for JFE in Kurashiki, they are also working on a similar transition, which requires huge capital investment, and I highly appreciate the effort of these companies. However, not merely transitioning the facility, I mean, even as of today, yes, they operate electric arc furnaces, but not normal conventional electric arc furnaces, but they claim that their furnaces are innovative. So for the furnace companies, they claim their furnaces are innovative. It's not merely the use of scrap. They say that their furnace is different from conventional. So products that could only be made by blast furnace in the past now can be made by electric arc furnace. And that is because of the innovative furnace, they say. And that is what they are proud about. I highly appreciate, and I sincerely hope that their plans will be realized. In addition to the blast furnace, there are the existing electric arc furnaces. Even already, the emission is lower, like 1/3 or 1/4 of the emission compared to blast furnace. However, even if today's EAF is low emission, in order to achieve near zero emission, first of all, the electricity, it has to be renewable, or decarbonized electricity must be sufficiently utilized in the first place. And even if it is electric arc furnace, ultimately, a little bit of fossil will still be required, like the preheating or the protection inside the electric arc furnace. Fossil fuel cannot be zero. So how to replace that remaining use of fossil fuel? So additional effort is still required. So we have to pay attention to such remaining challenges. In Japan, there are subsidies or support policies for low-emission steel, and in the recent few years, such a support have expanded. First of all, support for capex. For new build or retrofit, there are subsidies to support capital investment. I mentioned about Yahata, Kurashiki or JFE, Yahata of Nippon Steel. A large amount of subsidies have been provided for the transition. And this is the key pillar of the GX, Green Transition, policy of the country. Not only that, but energy efficiency subsidies have been available in Japan. And part of this subsidy goes indeed to iron and steel producers. So this is not only limited to steel, but there is a subsidy for overall energy efficiency activities. So as there are new decarbonization programs, what is considered effective and important is the subsidies for R&D activities. And for long, R&D has been subsidized. Regarding hydrogen DRI, subsidy is available, but hydrogen use in blast furnace, such project and R&D related to that has attracted a large amount of subsidy in the early phases, and this has continued for many years. And after that, now we are at this stage. So already there has been substantial subsidies for hydrogen in blast furnace. And OPEX subsidies for the operation, there is subsidies, like tax credit, tax incentive is available. IRA, the United States Inflation Reduction Act, I thought that was very impactful. And I had thought that Japan also has similar tax credits. So the production process at blast furnaces, if the processes are transitioned, 20,000 yen are subsidized, 20,000 yen of subsidies per ton. So I think this is very effective in order to transition from conventional blast furnace process. Regarding hydrogen, Japan has difficulty procuring hydrogen. And therefore, there is the support. And in Europe already, there are subsidies starting. And in Japan, the NESA has to be supported, the policy gap support for hydrogen procurement. I must say that this is quite a generous support. But for the iron and steel industry to make use of this kind of support, they still have some distance to go. And at the moment, what we are focusing is the GX ETS. The introduction of ETS, it is going to become fully launched from fiscal 2026. And large-scale emitters will have to participate in the ETS. Considering iron and steel makers, there will be benchmarking, and based on benchmarking, there will be free allowance allocation. So not a big change maybe, but according to some rumors, there is a cap on the carbon pricing, and we feel that that cap might be a bit low. But because the cap is low, for iron and steel maker, when they think about the next investment, considering the carbon pricing, rather than making a fresh investment, they might as well be incentivized to pay a little bit more in the ETS. However, how this scheme will be made stringent going forward, we will have to watch. And the Energy Conservation Act, this has been in place for some years. And now on the demand side, there are many support introduced. First is the Green Procurement Act. So for the iron and steel embodied product, Standard 1 is the newly established standard framework. And if there is no impediment in the procurement, this standard fulfillment is encouraged. After all, this is led by the government of Japan, and therefore, we might feel that it is not mandatory or obligatory, but because it is the government of Japan, after all, the government is always very serious, so I do think that this could be really effective. But what does it mean when there are a problem or impediment to the procurement, and it could be expensive? On the demand side, what I think is extremely important, what I think is the key or crucial is the subsidies to deploy clean energy vehicles. Yes, I also drive EVs, and when you purchase EV, there will be a subsidy. And it's not only EV, but including hybrid, it's overall clean energy cars. And If green steel is utilized, if low emission material is used, then it is called low emission steel. If that is used for clean energy vehicles, there will be a subsidy of 50,000 yen. So this is a subsidy directly to the car purchaser. So it's not a subsidy for the car makers, it is for the end driver. So which means that the price, I think, can be passed through because there is a subsidy directly to the ordinary people who buy the car. And another is a GX Leadership Declaration. It is now being replaced or is going to be replaced by the framework called GX Future League. That is, including iron steel, it is a declaration that the entity will procure low emission product, and those companies will receive preferential subsidies. So this is another incentive available. Apart from that, this is another area where I hope to see more progress. And I think this was already discussed at the government level at the Green Iron Study Group. The available subsidies are based on what is called the GX steel. But to cover more low emission steel, life cycle carbon assessment for the building, this will be introduced from fiscal 2028. So I hope that this program will become more stringent. From 2028, the initial calculation for the construction, what will be the LCA carbon emission, and eventually there could be a minimum level requirement, and we hope that that will be realized. And in civil engineering and the construction, many different types of support programs have started, and these are all information for you.
One of the message that I communicate to you all is be it subsidies, particularly financial support, or GX steel, where the Japanese Steelmakers Association provides the guideline, and for the steel products that is compatible with that guidelines is the subject of the support. And there are many discussions happening at this moment. I'm not sure whether the final decision is made or not. However, mass balance way and allocation methods, where there are two methods. But among the steel makers, when emission reduction projects are being undertaken and the from the blast furnace to electric arc, the reduced amount of emission is being pulled and reflected in the DRI. And ultimately, all these pooled emission reduction is now assigned to each and every product. And each product will bear the certificates so that be it full or be it half, as long as the reduction is being observed and there's no particular problem of support. Now, allocation methods varies, but basically it is just to explain how a business or a company aggregates the total reduction of emission, and it will simply be allocated to each product. But there are so many discourse about this methods as well, because it is not the product itself. The product with the certificates will enable the users to know, identify the emissions volume. So it's a bit complicated to be aware of, but the guideline states that what will constitute the emission reduction projects, and abiding by such a concept, you will have to incorporate into your business. And for GX Corporate, it is not the real steel visible. So therefore, if there is a low carbon steel to be actually produced, and then the reduction amount to be certified by certificate, would that be okay or not? Because the aggregated emissions is now once pooled and after that allocated, and such a method is considered a bit of a problem. So how would that be changed over time would have to be explored in the future. And think about allocation. GX still is for the users who are not conscious of the low carbon products will forced to buy the high emission steel, and low carbon products will put together and provide it to the low carbon user. So I think that valuation itself would change time to time, but when the reduction project has been pursued, and whether such a emission reduction projects are agreeable from users' point of view. There are something pros and cons as well. Some projects could be agreeable by the demand side and others. So from blast furnace to electric arc, particularly innovative, the arc that sometimes is presumed to be useful way. However, it's not the scrap. A DRI is used and high quality products are being manufactured, and based upon the premise, the low carbon products are finally be approved or agreed by the demand side. So what is the status of emission reduction efforts of steel makers? And although the carbon reduction is pooled and aggregated, and what are the sources of reduction coming from? And such a main body of reduction will have to be explored or identified by the user if the users wants truly low carbon products. And this is a right-hand side, which is excerpts from the statement where GX Steel will be receiving the government support and subsidy. But besides that, there's a low carbon footprint product, because electric arc will have a lower carbon emissions, and existing arc will have a lower emission because of the more innovative technology. And some of the steel not applicable to GX steel might have some low carbon nature as well. So GX steel target is 1,000 ton. So government targets at the 2030 the low carbon steel target, where GX steel will occupy about 10%. And what about the remainder? The rest of the all steel would have to go through such a assessment mechanisms, and when that happens, the use of credits and how GX Steel is allocating and so forth. Global assessment framework is actually underway, but it is still under discussion. So we in Japan will have to also think about what are the priorities and what is important. But the international assessment framework has to be built in our mind and try to assess. And we'd like to link our efforts with the international assessment framework as well. The reason why is steel is global commodity to begin with. And another factor is there is a demand-side initiative which is considered important, and important demand-side initiative will have to be linked so that near-zero emission products, which is beyond the GX, the demand side will purchase such products and also investing in such products, and such a pathway will have to be developed going forward, and that's what we would like to explore going forward. Lastly, when you think about this, all of the products will have to be assessed, and be it labeling or be it rating system will have to be provided. I think that this topic that I'd like to talk about at the next occasion, where there are many assessment framework. Think about the scrap proportion percentage, and so there are some not incorporating scrap, or recent European product labeling is such that it is simply the carbon footprint intensity is the only one that is indicated as labeling as well. Which one makes the most sense is something that we need to think about. But being simple is actually very important, in my opinion. So bear that in your mind, perhaps be useful. So I've covered the evaluation and credits and also policy, but think about the expansion demand for low carbon steel, yet there are so many more complicated factors around this particular topic. So this chart describes all possible complications, and this is when I prepared this for the first time, it was really complicated, and therefore I asked AI to simplify, and they have prepared this. And I tried to color code, but the final line doesn't change the color according to the AI, and therefore I just kept the color coding as is. But I just wanted to demonstrate that there are so many areas that we need to address going forward. And the final comment is that once again, I'd like to re-emphasize that think about a formation of the green market in Japan, then it is not just GX steel, but non-GX steel would have to be included to think about the more full-fledged countermeasures. And as I mentioned earlier, a disclosure for Scope 3 and embodied carbon system, for example, these will have to be advanced. And in order to make that possible, the overall labeling and assessment framework will have to be put in place. What is described in red is that cooperation with the demand initiative is important. Please rely on their platform so that you can explore this opportunity. There are so many headwinds against this type of efforts, and cooperation with demand initiatives would be really helpful for them and also us as well. And the next topic is by area, we need to identify specific the barriers and challenges as well. I personally am interested in constructions and so forth, so I tend to cover the construction industries. There's so many barriers, sometimes as trading practices and location issues, allocation issues, and so forth. In order to address this, certificate is perhaps as a required methods. Then we need to recognize such certificate-based approach as well. But when you think about intrinsic issues, you need to pursue the very core issues to be addressed going forward. In order to approach to near zero emission production, 2030, 2035, 2050 carbon zero target is not sufficient. Well, there are massive investments starting for the 2030, so I strongly hope that such projects will have quite a significant impact. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nishida-san. We will now go on to the panel discussion. May I invite our panelists to the front, please? It's about 90 minutes or so since we started the program, and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I do feel that you might be a bit fatigued, but our panelist, Ms. Takase, when she is on the panel, there will be an exercise to stretch ourselves. So I hope you will join us and stretch yourselves. You are welcome to stand up, stretch yourselves, because this panel will be about 55 to 60 minutes or so. So we might have an exercise, or you are welcome to sort of exercise yourselves, like turning our necks. Because just remaining seated is not good for our health in the first place. So while we are talking, we don't mind if you keep moving at your seat. Be relaxed. So, the panel discussion, we will discuss how we can accelerate decarbonization in iron and steel in Japan, how to trigger change from the demand side. Introducing the panelists from RMI, a Climate-Aligned Industry Program Principal, Mr. Kyle Clark-Sutton. From Climate Group, we have Ms. Samin Khan. From the Government of Japan, METI, Metal Industries Division, Manufacturing Industries Bureau, Director Nabeshima. From our institute, Senior Manager and GHG Protocol Technical Working Group, Scope 2 member, Ms. Takase. And the moderator from our institute, Nishida-san. Thank you. Again, it's me. We learned about the platform of RMI and also the Climate Group as a demand-side initiative. Both have been extremely effective and active. Thinking about such existing activities, we need to leverage these precedent. We must learn from such advanced activities. In the iron and steel sector, Climate Group and RMI, compared to the renewable electricity, the iron and steel activities are younger in age, have shorter history, and therefore here in Japan, we would like to keep that in mind and try to learn as much as possible. Demand side initiative. It is important because in the early stage of the market transition, market signals or investment foreseeability will be pushed up that policies alone cannot achieve. So SSBP by RMI, I think it is an extremely interesting project. And there were many explanations about the scheme and the policies, but I will be interested to hear actual contract agreements, if any, real cases. To the extent possible, we would like to hear concrete examples. And in the Japanese market, how can we realize such contracts and agreements here in Japan? For that, what we will have to do is what we would like to learn. Because I understand the platform is quite flexible. It allows a flexibility, and therefore we hope that there will be a potential here in Japan. So I would be interested to hear your viewpoint and observation about Japan.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So I think the decarbonization of the steel sector and demand side initiatives are young compared to other sectors. In our North America project, the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform is currently in bilateral contract negotiations with finalist projects. And so our first sort of official contracts, we hope we will be announcing later this year. But there are also a lot of companies that are working at smaller scales and entering into pilot scale agreements or commercial scale bilateral agreements with steel companies. So one example is Microsoft announced a procurement from Stegra in Sweden for both environmental attribute certificates and physical delivery of steel. And then late last year in October, Meta announced an agreement with Electra, which is an iron maker in Colorado in the United States. And both Microsoft and Meta are part of the buyers platform. I think there are also other examples outside of North America. For example, Hybrid, which is a pilot scale project in Sweden. That's a joint venture between SSAB, LKAB, and Vattenfall, is selling selling small volumes of green steel out of their project. And also in the Asia Pacific region, there is a lot of exciting project development happening in Australia. And one example is Progressive Green Solutions, which is a green iron project in Western Australia that has announced an agreement with ThyssenKrupp to acquire their green iron to supply electric arc furnaces in Europe. So I think what we're seeing is as we work towards the first collaborative procurement through SSBP, we're seeing companies that are members of SSBP and also outside of SSBP taking important steps to create these sort of these early agreements and early transactions that we can all learn from. Mm-hmm. And I think as far as the potential for Japan to replicate these types of transactions, the important thing to remember for buyers in Japan is that even small volumes today is very impactful because we are still very early and every transaction allows the market to learn and develop important tools and resources like contract terms and better understand the challenges that buyers and suppliers will face in developing these transactions. And so every transaction is important, and we can all learn from them.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Then going on to Samin, if I may. So there is the RMI project, and Steel Zero is your group's initiative and the demand side initiative. there might be difference in the characteristics. And SSBP of RMI, as was mentioned, it is an advance offtake commitment, which I think is aimed for. And the Steel Zero, based on such a commitment, debates and consultations are to take place. So to deepen engagement, a dialogue with the stakeholders, I think there is a big emphasis on the process of dialogue and engagement. Am I correct in my observation? And to replicate that in Japan, hopefully, if there are any advices or tips, asking for your observations, Amin?
Yes, of course. There's, like I mentioned during my presentation, demand is represented by so many companies in so many sectors operating in different regions that have different realities, different level of maturity with developing its own low-carbon steel market. So it's important that when we work on a Steel Zero-like framework to aggregate demand, that we are also looking at what different markets would need and at what stage they are and what level of influence or of coming together and direction setting is required. So you're right, that process as well is very important, because we want to create a mass market shift. So to create that mass market shift, we need to understand in different supply chains, in different regions, what is taking place at the moment, or what is the gap that we can come in and play a role in. So I think one of the ways that we do that is, forums where we have the ability to bring multiple demand side actors from across the supply chain, so that collectively they can have meaningful and valued discussion on aligning their own direction for their own organization, and then coming together to understand that if they have a target that they want to set for Scope 3 emissions to work with their suppliers, how ready are their suppliers to then come on that journey with them? And so facilitating these discussions itself is crucial. And that's what we do in different parts of the world, or when we focus on specific sectors to look at. For example, like I talked about the wind energy sector meeting that we had last month. It was, okay, what is the reality of the wind value chain in Europe, for example? So that process is very important, because coming out of that process, we then get an alignment between a group of companies on what green steel means to them, what action they may need to take to progress that procurement of green steel, and then what's then needed to come together to communicate with other parts of the stakeholder group. So what's needed for them to then communicate it to the steel industry or to policymakers, that as a buyer's side, what's kind of required. So those are the kind of things that we can facilitate through the process of having conversations, of making commitments that can ultimately then lead to taking action. So that's what I think is possible and is the opportunity here in Japan as well.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, in Japan, when it comes to the procurement of iron and steel, yes, we are convening this seminar today, but a very little opportunity to talk among different stakeholders indeed. So yes, I understand the importance of such engagement and dialogue processes, moving step by step. If I may just jump to Ms. Takase, I have lots of questions for Mr. Nabeshima later, but Ms. Takase, yes, you are deeply engaged and involved with SBTI. And this, I think, is a big driver for the demand side stakeholders, which I think is acknowledged by everybody. And many Japanese companies are also active in SBTI. At the moment, I have heard that you are undergoing revision of the standard, and iron and steel sector is one of the important areas. So will you please tell me about that, please?
Thank you very much for the question. Should I cover the detail later? Perhaps this is the right moment for you to go through. Please pull out the slide. Ultimately, so SBT setting companies using the steel will assess the CO2 emission levels in their embedded body, embedded carbon, and they wish to reduce the carbon on embedded basis. And Ministry of Environment primary data will be used to estimate the scope 3, and that's what they started to say. That is, of course, is helpful, and yet it is quite a hard work at the CVP. I was actually getting engaged to consult and try to elucidate how the company could calculate the scope 3 number. Supply will be replaced quite quickly, and what is a reference year? And JHA protocol is in its revision process that perhaps primary data is desirable, but if there's a constraint such as replacing supply and so forth, what to do with that, and that topic is going to be included in the Scope 3 working group at the GHG protocol revision work. So Scope 3 total calculation method is currently being discussed at GHG protocol. Now SBTI is the initiative to set the target. Well, time passes while we are doing a discussion. We should not stop our initiative during that period of time. It is not the total carbon of Scope 3, but there is ongoing. This is trying to achieve, and all these efforts should be recognized and appreciated. C&ZS 2.0 will be finalized by the end of this year and to be published by this year as well. And what it means is that green steel with the different degrees of traceability, or the low carbon products with different traceability, while maintaining the high level of transparency, what type of sourcing is to be made. But we should not limit that product A is low carbon, product B will not be construed as low carbon. So that's the general tone of the discussion this moment.
Thank you. SBTI and other activities. Until standards or schemes are established, such initiatives, I think, play a crucial role. So setting targets and goals and other activities, I understand the importance. Mr. Nabeshima, thank you for joining us. Until a few minutes ago, he was in the Green Iron Study Group, but the Ino building is just beside METI government building, and he has rushed over across the roads to come to this building. And whilst Mr. Nabeshima was not with us, I tried to explain about the policies in Japan, of course, including some critical viewpoints from our institute. In Japan, yes, policies are being launched. However, not only policies, but demand-side leadership will become increasingly important. In particular, when it comes to decarbonization of iron and steel product, demand side plays a big role. There is the SSBP platform and Steel Zero, such initiatives. What do you think are the implications for policies here in Japan, is my question to you, sir. Or do you have any expectations about the possible impacts?
Well, from the policy point of view, well, for the steel mills and decarbonization of the steel mills, and in fact, so far, the carbon pricing and emission trading schemes have long been discussed as a means of decarbonization. But now I think that there is awareness around the world that hard to abate sector like steel industry will have a high marginal cost of reducing the carbon, and therefore, if emissions trading scheme is the only one and try to attain the full amount of decarbonization, then they will have to secure a tremendous amount of credits for that. And of course, carbon leakage is of course be explored by some players and so forth. And unfortunately, such a trading scheme will not generate a great impact on reducing carbon used in emitted by the steel industry. Now, in contrast, approaches centered around green steel and green markets is to maximize the power of the buyers who wish to contribute to the climate action. So by making emissions generated during production visible and appropriately valuing low emissions materials. And these approaches support and incentivize the producers' efforts to reduce emissions. Well, I think that we need to think about the balances between the two. Japan has introduced the emissions trading mechanisms, and we should not rely on the goodwill of the buyers to pursue the decarbonization. Of course, government will, of course, continue providing public support and technology development and capital investment. And yet, the influence of the buyers commit to climate action will be driving the societal change, and that is quite effective. And demand-side initiative will therefore play a major role in expanding green markets. Well, governments, manufacturers, and the demand initiatives and all have different positions and roles, but we could join hands to have a constructive dialogue and try to build a better society.
Thank you very much. There is so much that has to be considered. I take that as your message, and that the demand-side initiative necessary, I heard from the government of Japan. And in order to think about the required coordination, and SSBP and Steel Zero, responsible steel criteria, I briefly show the table, and it is one of the standard, and both organizations refer to the responsible steel criteria. Then, when Japan talks about GX steel, what might be the positioning in each of the program? What is the position of the GX steel according to Japan?
Yeah, so within SSBP, our buyers place a really high priority on leveraging global standards for accounting, and there are several reasons for that. I think first, they are interested in a high level of transparency and comprehensive product level accounting, and they're interested in that so that because they have their own stakeholders, so sometimes their customers or their clients who want to know that the investments that they're making in decarbonization are high quality and high integrity, and so they look for the more comprehensive accounting standards that are recognized globally. And responsible steel is one of those. We also have LESS. You also have CISA in China. And so it's not necessarily required to use a one specific one, but there are several that are working towards global harmonization. And I think the other reason why they place a high priority on this is because they recognize that, iron and steel is a global commodity and it's a global market. And so it's important to have harmonized standards that will allow for easy transactions across borders as the sector transitions and we build out new supply chains for clean supply of iron and steel. And I think lastly, as far as how GX steel fits into that, at this point, I think a lot of buyers are also prioritizing global standards because they see that in order to ensure that they are compliant with evolving policies and standards like from SBTi or Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, it's important to stick to that. And so what using global standards offers is access to that global market for both producers and for buyers. And I think that while GX steel does not yet, at this point, fit into that category, that doesn't mean that Japanese producers can't participate in that global market. It just might mean that they need to comply with multiple standards potentially.
So how about Samin-san?
Samin, any comments?
I think Kyle has pretty much said everything I was going to say as well, is for the exact same reasons. We have also in the Steel Zero initiative, of course, first partnered with Responsible Steel. And now, that was at the time when the Steel Zero initiative was set up. And now with the work that Responsible Steel and the Low Emission Steel Standard and the China Iron and Steel Association are doing to create the interoperability framework, which together within their membership will cover 60% of steel production globally. That's the kind of opportunity for us to then also iterate the demand side commitment under Steel Zero initiative to recognize these other standards as well. So immediately, that is what we're looking at with the GX steel framework as well. Of course, we've been reviewing and discussing it with the stakeholders here. So currently, there is not like a straightforward adoption of GX steel within the Steel Zero initiative. I think that's something we need to continue to review and to discuss in what ways it could be possible or what we may need to feedback or reflect on if we want it to be part of the Steel Zero. But so far, we don't have that position. Yes.
Thank you very much. Both have tried to be very polite with us, which might have made the responses rather difficult to follow. But if I may, Nabeshima-san, there is the Global Demand Side Initiative and GX steel, according to Japan, it may not exactly be compatible with the widely accepted global standard. I would like to ask your opinion and any possibility that the government of Japan will flexibly change the position of the government. Nabeshima-san?
Well, at the Green Steel panel, where the green steel for the GX steel, how such a route has been identified was that in Japan there were so many discussions going on where there's a emission reduction target. And to put it differently, additionality is something that we have explored. And at its core, GX steel based on the concept of verified emissions reductions, which has been extremely discussed in Japan. And That is the concept of additionality, where within the government scale-still study group discussions, concepts such as verified reductions and additionality have been emphasized as essential elements of creating a sustainable cycle of decarbonization investment. Japan has introduced a range of policies in green steel field and playing a pioneering role globally. And perhaps in other countries, there might be some different concepts as well. Now, there's a guidelines prepared by Japan Steel Makers Association. Therefore, it is not necessarily proposed by the Japanese government. And at the Japan Steel Makers Association, GX Steel has been discussed, and they have. We expect that they are going to continue a lot of discussions with many stakeholders. And we saw many discussions at the government's Green Steel Study Group discussions. ISO standards is prepared, and also GSO have proposed some ideas about the green steel and so forth. So there are so many proposals in regard to how to define the green steel. So Japan have launched many policies in regard to green steel so far, and we believe that Japanese government is one of the cutting-edge government to explore this opportunity. And at the same time, Japanese companies are still enjoying a high international competitiveness and the size and the volume, and therefore there's an international expectation that the Japanese companies and businesses will play a significant leading role in this area as well. So we will explain our policies clear, and we are more than happy to continue to discuss with other countries. But that itself does not mean that we intend to rigidly adhere to the existing our approach. We'd like to have a conversation with many demand-side organizations or others, and we'd like to think flexibly and revise approaches if needed. And my idea is that such flexibility is extremely important for expanding green steel makers and sustaining the cycle of decarbonization investment.
Thank you. Yes, the actual achieved amount, how to handle all that, there must be a deep consideration at this stage. As I talk with other people, it may not be stringent enough, and the real green iron steel, when we do not have the physically near zero iron steel product at this moment, a certain flexibility might be necessary. But with SPT, what is the current direction? Takase-san?
Thank you very much for your question. Out of the audiences today, perhaps 10% of the people would actually nodding. Well, it's like adversarial fighting between the samurai fighting each other. And in the background, there's something that is not visibly clear for the most of the people. I would like to resort to the slide, and there are more experts than me to talk about this one. Here's the summary applied by GHG protocol. How they summarize is that the inventory of emissions, the total emission volume, there are physical inventory of GHG. So that is left-hand side. For each scope 1, 2, and 3, scope 2 is location-based, for example. And the second idea is market-based GHG. And the market-based data is only available for scope 2. But what about applied to scope 3? If green steel is used and the CO2 could be reduced to calculate in the scope 3, particularly the category 1. That is the market-based GHG inventory. And as Mr. Nagashima mentioned earlier, based upon the baseline of GHGs and others, there are reductions. That is the GHG impact. And impact will be disclosed separately. And other indicators will also available for disclosure. So therefore, largely speaking, market, impact, and others. So such disclosure framework explored in GHG protocol. So RE100 was discussing about the market to scope 2. So based upon the contract, the electricity power will be sourced. So MAS TD0 is saying that for the steel sourcing, which is scope 3 market-based GHG inventory per se. Now, in GHG protocol, there is an ISO material included. This is the ISO product carbon footprint standards. This is early draft, so this is not the final decision. Please remember. But this is the kinds of proposal that has been made. What it says is the physical is more like location-based and contractual is like market-based, and mitigation is the impact. Well, this is how ISO is organized. This is a kind of a draft to show which one allows what. And we will aggregate everything and try to reduce. And the mass balance credit-based is something that is drawing attention. It says along the description, it will be allowed with the guardrail, and there will be some residuals. But that contents is going to be explained more later. I attempted to translate into Japanese now. So this is about the GHG protocol. Well, what about SBTI, which says that it will broaden the scope and try to allow? Well, traceability is more broad, and on the other hand, the averageable shall have to be used, and also carbon bank methods should not be used for integrity principles such as certificates and so forth, and all these are currently included. But what about this language and the final version? The businesses which sets SBTI for sourcing, which one is going to be included in calculation of the GHG emission? So Nabeshima-san said that government will be flexible, and that's so therefore I hope that he will review this type of a draft and come to the final decision.
So to pull and reduce, yes, we need to continue the focus and attention. Again, there are lots of implications. And at the moment, Japanese iron and steel makers, in order to transition to GX steel, we have to acknowledge and appreciate that the Japanese companies are very serious. For example, to pull and reduce the emission, what they have pulled, zero emission, half emission, might be claimed. And what about the remainder? And little by little, the carbon footprint might increase. That is understood, and how to execute the reduction programs. A lot of discussion are ongoing, and I trust that the Japanese companies will be very transparent in the information disclosure. If there is such disclosure, then I think collaboration with demand-side initiatives will be easier, And if it becomes more flexible in the future with possible potential changes in the future in Japan, I think there will be more collaboration possible. But not talking just only about standards, but how to encourage the demand side players. I think you are all interested. So may I go to Samin? Volvo, Siemens, Gamesa were mentioned. For companies to actually make a commitment, for them to make that big decision, what are the most important key factors that push the companies to declare that commitment? And considering Japan, policy foreseeability also, I think, will be necessary, that they expect more stringent policies in the future. Those are also factors, maybe?
Yes, what convinces demand-side companies to take action? I think it's no surprise that the best way to get companies to take action is when they have their own internal mandate, right? They're really serious about their own net zero transition. It is appreciated at their leadership level. It's clear and simple, and they're willing to take action in that case. I mean, external pressures from investors definitely helps, and overall competitiveness in a landscape that is quickly progressing towards a net zero transition. So, how companies can continue to retain their market position, to competitively put themselves in front to customers, to the market as well. Like, those are, I think, the kind of crucial steps that would make a company commit. In terms of, I think we've heard that there's a lot of really good advanced thinking here in Japan. Policies have always been supporting different industries through subsidies, through investments, and through, obviously capital expenses and through operational mechanisms. So it's great that kind of system exists over here. What I see personally as, I think, something that needs kind of further addressing, and I think, Nishida-san, you had also put this up on one of your slides, is first establishing what is that clear transition for the steel industry in terms of those milestones to reduce emissions, by what amount or percentage to reduce emissions, by what target years. I think once that is established, so there is a clear way to measure what progress or what success would look like here in Japan with the emission reductions taking place in the steel industry, then the policies will be, they can be better equipped to support that transition, both from a supply and a demand side. So I think it's great that there's so much that's already happening here, but if it could be targeted a little bit more, or focused a little bit more on ways to measure success out of the policy mechanisms, then that would obviously place, again, the success of the policies in actually helping to achieve the transition here.
Yes, so the policies require review. I think that is part of the implied message. And if I go back to Mr. Nabeshima, there is the Future League scheme in Japan about the GX Steel, and there is the incentive framework. In addition to that, low carbon footprint iron is necessary, and then scope 3 disclosure and regulations on buildings, architecture, embodied carbon will become increasingly important. What is the future prospect here in Japan? How you are working on this aspect, please?
Well, at the Green Steel Study Group, CFP to be utilized in steel industry is considered an important pillar. And in Japan, since 2028, the construction LCA is going to be implemented, and with that plan, the legislation is now proposed to the Parliament at this moment. And often, misunderstanding is that the METI is not necessarily non-support of such a electric arc. In fact, the steel, which would be low carbon to begin with, will have to be fairly assessed and valued. However, on top of that, the GHG reduction is a very important concept. Thus, we need a balance. So, high carbon steel to be replaced with the low carbon steel, that trend had to be advanced under the policy priority. And embodied carbon is one thing, but construction LC is one thing, but user side, demand side, when they think about the use of the steel, for example, the construction such as buildings and the others, so be it ultimate consumers or ultimate user or the businesses, whatever that they want, the information is necessary. And METI is organizing the study group sessions and tried to elucidate this area. Now, how one could label and represent that this particular product is low carbon and green steel. For example, the CFP of steel products alone is not the final goal. In the final products, how CFP will be reduced and how such labeling or representation will be made. And in the supply chain, what type of information will have to be passed on in the supply chain? And for that to consider the societal system on the whole will have to be explored.
Thank you. I agree with you, and it will become increasingly important. So when in the future, if there is an opportunity, we would like to continue the discussion about architecture, building area, construction area, in which case we will be inviting you again. And another point, maybe Kyle, we were talking about the green steel here in Japan. The cost or the green premium maybe not transparent enough or lack visibility. And the transparency of green premium that could be higher, preferably. So how can we improve the transparency of green premium? For example, if we think green steel is expensive, how, I'm not sure, but how can we justify the premium? Is it the bargaining power between the buyers and the seller? Or if you have any advices, please?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very natural desire to want to understand why something is more expensive. You know, even every day we go to the grocery store and we look at the, you know, the more expensive food versus the cheaper food, and we want to understand why that is. So I think that that's very relatable, and more transparency can increase confidence that buyers are getting value for that. And one of the things that is something that we facilitate as part of the Sustainable Steel Buyers Platform is increased price transparency for buyers. So we work with suppliers to collect information about the green premium and what is driving the green premium, whether it's capital investments or other cost categories, and that allows buyers to better understand and feel confident that their increased investment is actually helping to drive a real transformative change in the industry and enable projects that wouldn't be enabled otherwise. And so I think that to the extent that we can see more transparency on what is driving the green premium for green steel products in Japan, that will help buyers feel like they understand what they're buying, and will help to justify those additional investments. One of the things that we encounter in our work with buyers at SSBP is that we do work with companies, but we also work with individuals in those companies. And the individuals in those companies often have to do their own fighting inside the company to make the case for additional resources to make these decarbonization investments. And if they don't have good information and data to tell a compelling case to their chief financial officer, then even if it's a very good investment in meeting their decarbonization goals, they may not secure that support from their leadership at their company. And so we also, it's very important to allow to support the individuals that we're working with in those companies to make their own internal case for resources as well.
いや、それだけ
Indeed. Yes. Whether the buyers will be happy to provide all the information that we want, that would be excellent if they accept. And that's because RMA's facilitation strength is working. It's not that the buyers are so willing to directly provide the information to suppliers. No.
I think, just to make sure I understand, I think what we do is, in our process, we sit in between the buyers and the suppliers, and we collect information from suppliers that we can then summarize and aggregate and make anonymous, and share that with buyers. So buyers don't actually see the details of individual projects, at least not until they enter into bilateral negotiations with those suppliers. But what we are able to do, because we're facilitating that process, is collect information from across a number of suppliers so that buyers can understand what is driving green premiums across the whole market, not just with any one individual project. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
まあこの辺に関してはもっと後で追求。
Thank you very much. Yes, I can follow up on this kind of question, but thank you very much for trying your best. And in order to expand the green steel market, what is the most important at this moment? This would be inviting your final comments to each, starting with Samim, maybe?
I think what is important is to participate. I think we need every different type of stakeholder to be in it, in the game, to be kind of enthusiastic and interested in being part of the transition, whatever role that they have to play, if they can kind of understand that they do have an important role, and kind of come willing to learn, to build their awareness, and then willingness to take the next steps, and then to finally move towards action. And having this from every different stakeholder group, that'd be very important. So of course, we are talking about demand today, so definitely having that step up from demand as well.
And Kyle?
Buy. I want to encourage buyers to be ambitious and enter the market even for a small volume of steel, because even a small volume is very impactful today to support pilot projects, to learn and develop standard contract terms and resources that others that come after you can use and follow and make it easier. And so we need companies, we need buyers to enter the market. And I would also encourage buyers in Japan to and suppliers to look beyond their borders. In order to fully decarbonize iron making is going to be important to do it at as low a cost as possible. It's going to be important to partner with projects outside of Japan to build green iron making capacity where it's most economical.
はい、高瀬さん。
Ms. Takase?
Thank you very much. Well, in GHG protocol, SBTI, and being a committee member, I'm joining the discussion, and also CBP era that I joined discussion as well. And what I feel is that international standard, be it climate change or others, the standard is going to converge. Therefore, each and individual standards will not independent. For example, GHG, ISO are joining hands and tried to incorporate each factors. And dedicate yourself to your own expertise, and others are trying to make a full holistic approach in standards and incorporate everything. SBTI is one thing, but if you fully adhered, and then, of course, the low carbonization is, of course, is a cost. But the cost performance is going to be much significant than the cost itself, like Steel Zero or RMI's initiative is also the case. So nowadays, the standards are converging gradually. So you may not be able to adhere to the standards fully yet. If government could prepare the frame or regulation for half roughly standard, a converging standard would be really useful. Well, Green Steel Study Group session was organized in METI, and coincidentally, REI have organized this big event, and thank you very much. And I would like to express profound appreciation. And those of you who are highly interested in the green steel and being an audience and joining this conference, thank you very much. At the Green Steel Study Group, we've heard many case studies, and we presented that. But nowadays, there are so many initiatives being made all around the world. Some people says this is good, this is bad in Europe and others, and of course, such diverge, different opinions are of course is available, and that's okay in the world. But those of you who are interested in green steel, the initiative in this area, this is a proactive movement, and I hope that you will all try to endorse this type of green steel efforts. Green steel efforts are long being explored, and we are facing a critical juncture. So, which means that the decisions or activities that is going on in the recent years, it's going to impact the future green steel initiative, and therefore, I'm hoping that dear audience, please endorse and embrace such a green steel initiative. That if you could think about the GX Steel initiative, we very much appreciate it.
Once again, all the panelists and audience, thank you very much once again. As we have discussed, so far there were many takeaways, lots of observations, insights gained, both RMI and climate group. The demand side initiative is becoming increasingly important and powerful, influential, and leveraging the demand side players is important. And SS JCLP, which was mentioned by Kyle towards the end, to launch the program in the Asia Pacific. And the Japanese demand side, if you can look outside of our country, that there are many different options outside of Japan. I think we have noticed that as well. And today's action, even if the volume is small, to buy is important today, now, because the impact is going to be huge. And to engage amongst different stakeholders, the process of talking amongst each other is important. And Mr. Nabeshima also mentioned about actions. Yes, we have to act. Action is what is necessary. With my poor moderatorship, thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind attention to the audience. We have heard about international activities to drive demand for low carbon iron steel, and we have shared a huge amount of insight to cause changes led by the demand side. We would be very happy if today's program would be useful to your activities. To our guests online, I also express my gratitude for staying with us for long hours. If you are here with us in the hall, we have a networking reception. All of you are cordially invited. Please do stay and talk with your fellow participants. We would like to ask for your cooperation. If you could please kindly respond to our questionnaire so that we can improve our future program. Please access the QR code in front of you. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.